Most people are afraid of suffering, but suffering is a kind of mud to help the lotus flower of happiness grow. There can be no lotus flower without the mud. The act of transforming suffering. We all want to be happy, and there are many books and teachers in the world that try to help people be happier. Yet we all continue to suffer. Therefore, we may think that we're doing it wrong. Somehow we are failing at happiness. That isn't true. Being able to enjoy happiness doesn't require that we have zero suffering. In fact, the act of happiness is also the act of suffering well. When we learn to acknowledge, embrace, and understand our suffering, we suffer much less. Not only that, but we are also able to go further and transforming our suffering into understanding, compassion, and joy for ourselves and for others. One of the most difficult things for us to accept is that there is no realm where there is only happiness and there is no suffering. This doesn't mean that we should despair. Suffering can be transformed. As soon as we open our mouth to say suffering, we know that the opposite of suffering is already there as well. Where there is suffering, there is happiness. According to the creation story in the biblical book of Genesis, God said, "Let there be light." I like to imagine that light replied, saying, "God, I had to wait for my twin brother, darkness, to be with me. I can't be there without the darkness." God asked, "Why do you need to wait? Darkness is there." Light answered, "In that case, then I am also already there." If we focus exclusively on pursuing happiness, we might regard suffering as something to be ignored or resisted. We think of it as something that gets in the way of happiness. But the act of happiness is also at the same time the act of knowing how to suffer well. If we know how to use our suffering, we can transform it and suffer much less. Knowing how to suffer well is essential to realizing true happiness. Suffering and happiness are not separate. When we suffer, we tend to think that suffering is all there is at that moment, and happiness belongs to some other time or place. People often ask, "Why do I have to suffer?" Thinking we should be able to have life without any suffering is as deluded as thinking we should be able to have left side without a right side. The same is true of thinking we have a life in which no happiness whatsoever is to be found. If the left say, "Right, you have to go away, I don't want you, I only want the left," that's nonsense, because then the left would have to stop existing as well. If there's no right, then there's no left. When there's no suffering, there can be no happiness either, and vice versa. If we can learn to see and skillfully engage with both the presence of happiness and the presence of suffering, we will go in the direction of enjoying life more. Every day we go a little further in that direction, and eventually we realize that suffering and happiness are not two separate things. Cold air can be painful if you aren't wearing enough warm clothes. But when you're feeling overheat or you're walking outside with proper clothing, the embrace sensation of cold air can be a shock of feeling joy and aliveness. Suffering isn't some kind of eternal deep shock of oppression and pain. There might be things that cause you to suffer, such as loud music or bright light, which may bring other people joy. There are things that bring you joy that annoy another people. The rainy day that ruins your plan for a picnic is a boon for the farmer who fills it packed. Happiness is possible right now, today, but happiness cannot be without suffering. Some people think that in order to be happy, they must avoid all suffering, and so they are constantly vigilant, constantly worrying. They end up sacrifice all their spontaneity, freedom, and joy. This isn't correct. If you can recognize and accept your pain without running away from it, you will discover that although pain is there, joy can also be there at the same time. Some say that suffering is only an illusion or that to live wisely we have to transcend both suffering and joy. I say the opposite. The way to suffer well and be happy is to stay in touch with what is actually going on. In doing so, you will gain lively insight into the true nature of suffering and of joy. No Nhat, no Lotus. Both suffering and happiness are of an organic nature, which means they are both transitory. They are always changing. The flower, when it's white, becomes the compost. The compost can help grow a flower again. Happiness is also organic and impermanent by nature. It can become suffering, and suffering can become happiness again. If you look deeply into a flower, you see that a flower is made only of non-flower elements. In that flower, there is a cloud. Of course, we know a cloud isn't a flower, but without a cloud, a flower can't be. If there's no cloud, there's no rain, and no flower can grow. You don't have to be a dreamer to see a cloud floating in a flower. It's really there. Sunlight is also there. Sunlight isn't flower, but without sunlight, no flower is impossible. If we continue to look deeply into the flower, we see many other things like the earth and the mineral. Without them, a flower cannot be. So it's a fact that a flower is made only of non-flower elements. A flower can be by herself alone. A flower can only interbe with everything else. You can't remove the sunlight, the soil, or the cloud from the flower. In each of our Plum Village practice centers around the world, we have a lotus born. Everyone now we need to have mud for lotus to grow. The mud doesn't smell so good, but the lotus flowers smell very good. If you don't have mud, the lotus won't manifest. You can't grow lotus flower on marble. Without mud, there can be no lotus. It is possible, of course, to get stuck in the mud of life. It's easy enough to notice mud all over you at times. The hardest thing to practice is not allowing yourself to be overwhelmed by despair. When you are overwhelmed by despair, all you can see is suffering everywhere you look. You feel as if the worst thing is happening to you. But we must remember that suffering is a kind of mud that we need in order to generate joy and happiness. Without suffering, there is no happiness, so we shouldn't discriminate against the mud. We had to learn how to embrace and rattle out our suffering and the suffering of the world with a lot of tenderness. When I lived in Vietnam during the war, it was difficult to see our way through the dark and heavy mud. It seemed like the destruction would just go on and on forever. Every day people would ask me if I thought the war would end soon. It was very difficult to answer because there was no end in sight. But I knew if I said I don't know, that would only water the seed of despair. So when people ask me that question, I reply everything is impermanent. Even war. It will end someday. Now in that we could continue to work for a bit, and indeed the war did end. Now the former mortal enemies are busily trading and touring back and forth. And people throughout the world enjoy and practicing our tradition teaching on mindfulness and peace. If you know how to make a good use of the mud, you can grow beautiful lotus. If you know how to make good use of suffering, you can produce happiness. We do need some suffering to make happiness possible, and most of us have enough suffering inside and around us to be able to do that. We don't have to create more. Did the Buddha suffer? When I was a young monk, I believed that the Buddha didn't suffer once he had become enlightened. Namely, I asked myself, what the use of becoming a Buddha if you continue to suffer? The Buddha did suffer because he had a body, feelings, and perception, like all of us. Sometimes he probably had a headache. Sometimes he suffered from rheumatism. If he happened to eat something not well cooked, then he had intestinal problem. So he suffered physically, and he suffered emotionally as well. When one of his beloved students died, he suffered. How can you not suffer when a dear friend had just died? The Buddha wasn't a stone. He was a human being, but because he had a lot of insight, wisdom, and compassion, he knew how to suffer, and so he suffered much less. The Four Noble Truths. The very first teaching the Buddha gave after his enlightenment were about suffering. It's called the Four Noble Truths. The Buddha's Four Noble Truths are: there is suffering. They are call of action that generate in suffering. Suffering ceases. There is happiness, and they are call of action leading to the cessation of suffering, the arising of happiness. When you first hear that suffering is a noble truth, you might wonder what's so noble about suffering. The Buddha was saying that if we can recognize suffering, and if we embrace it and look deeply into its roots, then we'll be able to let go of the habit that fit it, and at the same time find a way to happiness. Suffering has its beneficial aspect. It can be an excellent teacher. What suffering is made of? There is a suffering of the body, including the sensation of pain, illness, hunger, and physical injury. Some of this suffering is simply unavoidable when there is the suffering of the mind, including anxiety, jealousy, despair, fear, and anger. We have the seed, the potential in us for understanding, love, compassion, and insight, as well as the seed of anger, hate, and greed. While we can't avoid all the suffering in life, we can suffer much less by not watering the seed of suffering inside us. Are you at war with your body? Do you neglect or burnish your body? Have you truly gotten to know your body? Can you feel at home with your body? Suffering can be either physical or mental or both, but every kind of suffering manifests somewhere in the body and creates tension and stress. We are told that we should release the tensions in our body. Many of us have tried very hard. We want to release the tension in our body, but we can't release it. Our attempt at reducing tension in us won't work unless we first acknowledge that it is there. When you cut your finger, you just want it and your body knows how to heal. When a non-human animal living in the forest is unsure, she knows what to do. She stops searching for something to eat or to looking for a mate. She knows through generation of ancestral knowledge that it's not good for her to do so. She finds a quiet place and just lie down, doing nothing. Non-human animal instinctively know that stopping is the best way to get help. They don't need a doctor, a restaurant, or a pharmacist. Stopping is the best way to get help. They don't need a doctor, a restaurant, or a pharmacist. We human beings used to have this kind of wisdom, but we have lost thoughts with it. We don't know how to rest anymore. We don't allow the body to rest, to release the tension and health. We rely almost entirely on medication to deal with sickness and pain. Yes, the most effective way to relieve and transform our suffering is already available to us without any prescription and at no financial cost. I'm not suggesting that you should throw away all your medication. Some of us do need to use certain medicine, but we can sometimes use them in smaller quantity and to much greater effect when we know how to let our body and mind truly rest. Healing medicine. The main affliction of our modern civilizations is that we don't know how to handle the suffering inside us, and we try to cover it up with all kinds of consumption. Retail battle, a plethora of classics and novel Davis to help us cover up the suffering inside. But unless and until we are able to face our suffering, we can't be present and available to life, and happiness will continue to elude us. There are many people who have enormous suffering and don't know how to handle it. For many people, it starts already at a very young age, so we don't school teach our young people the way to manage suffering. If a student is very unhappy, he can't concentrate and he can't learn. The suffering of each of us affects others. The more we learn about the act of suffering well, the less suffering there will be in the world. Mindfulness is the best way to be without suffering without being overwhelmed by it. Mindfulness is the capacity to do in the present moment, to know what's happening in the here and now. For example, when we lifting our two arms, we conscious of the fact that we lifting our arm. Our mind is with our lifting up our arms, and we don't think about the past or the future, because lifting our arm is what's happening in the present moment. To be mindful means to be aware. The energy that know what is happening in the present moment. Lifting our arms and knowing that we're lifting our arm, that mindfulness. Mindfulness of our action. When we're breathing in and we're breathing in, that mindfulness. When we make a step and we know that the steps are taking place, we are mindful of the step. Mindfulness is always mindfulness of something. The energy that helps us be aware of what is happening right now and right here, in our body, in our feelings, in our perception, and around us. With mindfulness, you can recognize the presence of the suffering in you and in the world. And it will at the same energy that you eternally embrace the suffering. By being aware of your in-breath and out and breathe in, you generate the energy of mindfulness, so you can continue to handle the suffering. Practitioners of mindfulness can help and support each other in recognizing, embracing, and transforming suffering. With mindfulness, we are no longer afraid of pain. We can even go further and make good use of suffering to generate the energy of understanding and compassion that help us, and we can help others to help and be happy as well. Generating mindfulness. The way we start producing the medicine of mindfulness is by stop picking and taking a conscious breath, giving our complete attention to our in-breath and our out-breath. When we stop and take a breath in this way, we unite body and mind and come back home to ourselves. We feel our body more fully. We are truly alive only when the mind is with the body. The right news is that oneness of the body can mind and can be realized by one in-breath. Maybe we had not been kind enough to our body for some time. Recognizing the tension, the pain, the stress in our body, we can bat it in our mindfully awareness, and that's the beginning of healing. If we take care of the suffering inside us, we have more clarity, energy, and strength to arrest the suffering, violence, poverty, and inequity of our loved ones, as well as the suffering in our community and the world. If, however, we are preoccupied with the fear and despair in us, we can help remove the suffering of others. There is an act to suffering well. If we know how to take care of suffering, we not only suffer much less, we also create more happiness around us and in the world. The chapter 2, saying hello. The first step in the act of transforming suffering is to come home to our suffering and recognize it. For most of us, there was a mental discourage going on day and night in our heads. We rely the past, we worry about the future. We don't stop to take a breath to even notice with we suffering, until suddenly, swimming out of nowhere, the suffering overwhelms us. Our thinking, perception, and worry take away all the space inside us and keep us from being in touch with what happened in moment to moment. The Buddha said that nothing can survive without the food. This isn't true. It is true not just for the physical existence of living beings, but also for state of mind. Love needs to be nurtured and fed to survive, and our suffering also survive because we enable and feed it. We ruminate on suffering, regret, and sorrow. We chew on them, swallow them, bring them back up, and eat them again and again. If we feed in our suffering while we are working, eating, or talking, we are making ourselves victims of the goal of the past, of the future, of our worry in the present. We are not living our life. If we try to use consumption to ignore or distract ourselves from our suffering, we end up making the suffering work. We turn on the television, we talk or text or gossip on the phone. We get on the internet. We find ourselves in front of the refrigerator over and over again. When we cut ourselves off from the band in our mind, we are also abandoning our body where suffering is being stored. When we feel loneliness and despair, we seek to cover them up and pretend they are not there. We don't feel very well inside, so in order to forget, we go and look for something to eat even if we're not hungry at all. We eat in an attempt to feel better, but we end up becoming addicted to eating. Because we're trying to cover up the suffering inside, and the real problem is left unaddressed. Or we may become addicted to computer games or other kind of audiovisual entertainment. Electronic distraction not only fail to have the underlying suffering, they may contain stories or images that fit our craving, jealousy, anger, or despair. Instead of making us feel better, they numb us only briefly. They make us feel worse. To consume in order to cover up our suffering doesn't work. We need a spiritual practice to have the strength and skill to look deeply into our suffering, to get insight into it and make a breakthrough. Stopping and acknowledging suffering. When suffering arises, the first thing to do is to stop, follow our breathing, and acknowledge it. Don't try to deny uncomfortable emotions or push them down. Breathing in, I know suffering is there. Breathing out, I say hello to my suffering. To take one mindful breath requires the presence of our mind, our body, and our intention. Without conscious breath, we reunite our body and mind and arrive in the present moment. Just breathing in mindfully already brings out a surprising amount of freedom. With each breath, we generate mindful energy, bringing mind and body together in the present moment to receive this caring acknowledgement of our suffering. In just 2 or 3 breaths taken with your full attention, you may notice that regret and sorrow about the past have both, as well as uncertainty, fear, and worry about the future. Body and mind together. Each of us has a body with where we aren't always in talk with it. Maybe our body needs earth, our body is calling earth, but we don't hear it. We shall catch up in our job, our computer, phone, or in our conversation. We can forget we even have a body. If we can get in talk with our body, then we can also get in talk with our feeling. There are many feelings calling to us. Every feeling is like our child. Suffering is a hurt child crying out to us, but we ignore the voice of the child within. The process of healing begins when we mindfully breathe in. In daily life, very often our body is here, but our mind is off in the past, in the future, or in our project. The mind is not with the body. When we breathe in and focus our attention on our in-breath, we reunite body and mind. When we become aware of what is going on in the present moment, in our body, in our perception, and around us. When we bring our mind home to our body, something wonderful happens. Our mental distress stops its chattering. Thinking can be productive, but the reality, the mode of thinking is unproductive. When we think, it may be easy for us to be low in our thinking, but when we use our breath to bring our mind home to the body, we can stop the thinking. When you come back to yourself and breathe mindfully, your mind attention has only one object, your breath. If you continue to breathe in and out mindfully, you maintain a state of presence and freedom. Your mind will be clearer and you will make better decisions. It's much better to make a decision when your mind is clear and free rather than its way of fear, anger, and worry. When I was a young man, I believed that it took a long time to get any kind of insight. The truth is there are insights that can come right away. When you practice mindfulness or breathing, you know right away that you are alive. And that to be alive is a wonder. If you can be aware that you have a living body and notice where there are tensions in your body that already has an important insight. With that insight, you have already begun to diagnose this situation. You don't need to practice 8 years or 20 years in order to wake up. Breathing mindfully isn't something hard to do. You don't have to suffer while breathing. You are already doing it all day long. You don't need to struggle to control your breathing. In fact, breathing in can become a real pleasure. You should allow yourself to breathe in naturally while focusing your attention on your in-breath. It's like the morning sunshine on a flower that has closed overnight. The sunshine doesn't interfere with the flower. The sunshine should embrace and subtly permits the flower. Embraced by the energy of the sunshine, the flower begins to bloom. The point of distraction. When we stop the business of the mind and can come back to ourselves, the enormity and rawness of our suffering can seem very intense because we are so used to ignore it and distracting ourselves. When we feel suffering, we have the urge to run away from it and fill ourselves up with junk food, junk entertainment, anything to keep our mind off the pain and that's it inside us. It doesn't work. We must succeed in numbing ourselves from it for a little while. But the suffering inside wants our attention. It will factor and turn away until we get it. We run away from ourselves because we don't want to be with ourselves. Our pain is a kind of energy that is not pleasant. We fear that if we release our diversion and come back to ourselves, we'll be overwhelmed by the suffering, despair, anger, and loneliness inside. So we continue to run away. But if we don't have the time and the willingness to take care of ourselves, how can we offer any children care to the people we love? That's why the first practice is to stop running, come home to our body, and recognize our suffering. When we notice anger of anxiety coming up, we can recognize the feeling of suffering. Suffering is one energy. Mindfulness is another energy that we can call on to come and embrace the suffering. The practice of mindful breathing is essential because it provides us with the energy we need for the other step of taking care of suffering. With mindful breathing, you can recognize the presence of a painful feeling. Just like the suffering greets a younger sibling. You can say, "Hello, my suffering, I know you there." In this way, the energy of mindfulness keeps us from being overwhelmed by painful feelings. We can even smile to our suffering and say, "Good morning, my pain, my sorrow, my fear. I see you. I am here. Don't worry." Embracing suffering. If we let the suffering come up and take over our mind, we can be quickly overwhelmed by it. So we have to invite another energy to come up at the same time. The energy of mindfulness, the function of mindfulness is first to recognize the suffering and then to take care of the suffering. The work of mindfulness is first to recognize the suffering and the second to embrace it. A mother taking care of her crying baby naturally will take the child into her arms without suppressing, choking it, or ignoring the crying. Mindfulness is like that the mother recognizing and embracing suffering without judgment. So the practice is not to fight or suppress the feeling, but rather to cradle it with a lot of tenderness. When a mother embraces her child, that energy of tenderness begins to penetrate into the body of the child. Even if the mother doesn't understand it at first why the child is suffering and she needs some time to find out what the difficulty is, just her act of taking the child into her arms with tenderness can already bring relief. If we can recognize and grab the suffering while we breathe mindfully, there is relief already. Embracing our suffering might seem to be the opposite of what we want to do. Especially if our suffering is very large with depression. Depression is one of the most widespread forms of suffering in our time. It can take away our peace, our joy, our stability, and even our ability to eat, move about, or do simple tasks. It can seem insurmountable, and we may think that the only thing we can do is either to run away from it or to give in into it. But non-judgmentally recognizing and embracing the great suffering is not at all the same thing as giving it into it. Once you have offered your acknowledgement and care to the suffering, it naturally will become less impenetrable and more workable. And then you have the chance to look into it deeply with kindness, but still always with a solid ground of mindful breathing to support you and find out why it had come to you. It is trying to get your attention, to tell you something, and now you can take the opportunity to listen. You can ask someone to look with you, a teacher, a friend, a so-called therapist. Whether alone together with your friend, you can explore what kind of root it had, and what nutriment and habit of consumption have been feeding your sorrow. You can discover how, through looking deeply, you can transform the organic garbage into compost. We in turn might become many beautiful flowers of understanding, compassion, and joy. The bell, even with the bad intention and even with a long-standing mindfulness and practice, we all had a tendency to run into the future or go back into the past to research for happiness elsewhere. A bell of mindfulness, whether it's an actually bell of some other sound, is a wonderful reminder to come back to ourselves, to come back to life here in the present moment. The sound of the bell is the voice of the bird within. Every one of us has put the bird in nature. The capacity for compassion, clear understanding nature within us. So when we hear the sound of the bell, it will like practicing mindfulness. We can respond to that intervention with respect and appreciation. In my tradition, every time we hear the bell, we pause. We stop moving, talking, and thinking, and we listen to the voice of the heart. When don't say that we hit the bell or strike the bell, rather we say we invite the bell to sound. Because the bells is an enlightened brain that helps us wake up and guide us home to ourselves. Gentleness and non-violent and characteristic of the sound of the bell. Its sound is gentle but very powerful. When you hear the sound of the bell, take the opportunity to come home to yourself and enjoy your breathing. Take a few moments to inhale and exhale deeply and talk a little happiness. If you want to experience what the end of suffering will feel like, it is in the here and the now with this breath. If you want even, it's right here. Pretty now? I know I am pretty. Pretty now? I smile. I just finished two first chapter, and tomorrow, maybe the day after tomorrow, I will finish the let me call the 6th chapter. Looking deeply. Yeah, I finished here. Thank you for listening, all my dear friends.